sometimes God wants to teach you something that requires him to show up differently in your life than you're used to. And you might not even realize that he's there. Just like these disciples, they didn't even know that Jesus was with them as he was teaching them all these things. Sometimes we're not aware of God's presence in our lives in the obvious liquid love rolling over your body sort of way. But in those moments, what God is probably doing is wanting to teach us something incredibly important. So sometimes God's silence is him teaching us something that we didn't know. Other times, as strange as this might sound, sometimes God's silence is his compassion. Sometimes when you pray to God and you don't hear anything, when you ask him to give you answers and there's no response, sometimes that's actually the compassion of God. Here's what I mean. Let me read you a quote out of an amazing book, Out of Solitude by Henry Nouwen. Listen to what Henry says. When we honestly ask ourselves which persons in our lives mean the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving much advice, solutions, or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a warm and tender hand. The friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief or bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our powerlessness, that is the friend who cares. And then a guy named Strawn Coleman wrote a book, quoted this quote, and then commented on it. And his comment is super good too, so let me finish the thought. Strawn Coleman now says, God is the friend who listens and cares, not just with factual intent, but with compassion. Though we may not emotionally feel it when we pour ourselves out to God, his silence isn't distance or disconnection. It's empathetic love. It's expressing itself in something far more important and powerful than words. Witness. God is communing with us through his silent response, becoming not the friend who offers easy answers or tried advice, but the friend who realizes that sometimes it's more important to be seen and heard than answered. I remember a time I was with a woman who had just tragically and suddenly lost her husband at 43 years old. Literally, it was the day before. She's obviously an emotional wreck, and I'm there. And she walks up to me, and she just says, Luke, why did this happen? How did this sort of thing happen? How do I understand this? And I sat there, and I had different ideas. Well, God made a world with free will, and because human beings have free will, they abuse that free will, evil resulted in the earth. And so what you just experienced was a manifestation of that evil that went back to the abuse of free will in the Garden of Eden. I could have went into all of that. But I knew that wasn't the right thing to say, was it? I didn't say anything. I looked at her, I cried with her, and that was pretty much it. And as I was leaving, she came up to me and another pastor, a friend of mine who was there, and said, thank you guys so much. You don't know how meaningful it was for you just to be here. And I was shocked because I was starting to feel insecure about not saying anything, Because part of it was I didn't want to go into all of the explanations, but part of it was just that it was such an intense moment. I didn't really know what to say. And what that taught me was that sometimes in our deepest place of pain and hardship, what we need is not an answer, we just need presence. And that is what I mean by the compassionate silence of God. Sometimes we get so distracted in crying out to God to get the answer that we want that we miss the fact that he's sitting right next to us, weeping with us, arm around us. We get so distracted by the angry, sometimes desperate desire for clarity that we miss the withness. And the truth is that sometimes he's not going to give you the perfect answer that solves everything for you emotionally, because there's no such thing. Because we live in a broken, fallen world where we do experience still pain and hardship and harm, sometimes what you get is not a God with the perfect answer, but the perfect love to be with you right there in that moment.